Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Writers Chat. We're so glad that you're joining us, whether you're here in the community, excuse me, or watching the replay. Very glad to have you with us. My name is Johnny Alexander. I'm joined by all of our participants who want to be on screen today. And so we're really glad to have that because we're doing an open mic discussion on a book called Unleash the Writer Within by Cec Murphey. So we're going to jump right in, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about Mr. Murphey, and then we're going to start talking about the book that he wrote. So Cec Murphey is a New York Times bestselling author who has written or co-written more than 135 books, which just is incredible to me. He does say he's a fast writer, and obviously he is. And he wrote the bestsellers or co-wrote the bestsellers 90 Minutes in Heaven with Don Piper and Gifted Hands, the BEN Carson Story with Dr. Ben Carson. His books have sold in the millions, have been translated into more than 40 languages, and have brought hope and encouragement to countless readers around the world. He has been a wonderful contributor to writers' conferences, including providing scholarships for many people to help them get started on their own writing careers. His generosity is just known among the writing community. I know there are probably people here who have been blessed by his generosity. Among his many prestigious awards are a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Advanced Writers and Speakers Association and the Extraordinary Service Award from the American Society of Journalists and Authors, both honoring him for his numerous contributions to the field of writing and his selfless service to other writers. So for him to write a book called Unleash the Writer Within, the Essential Writer's Companion, you know that this is somebody who absolutely knows what he's talking about and just has a lot of wisdom to share, and whose spiritual and personal goal seems to be as transparent as he can be, which allows us to be more transparent too, which is really, it's really nice. And that's what we're going to start out talking about, chapter 1, which is titled, Why Do You Write? Hard question. We may think we know the answer, but as Cec Murphey says, this is a question he asks at writers' conferences all the time. And it seems like the first answers he gets are either the answers that people think he wants to hear, or they're trying to sound noble, or they're trying to sound super spiritual. And it's not that they're necessarily doing that on purpose, but it's just, it can be a hard question, and you want to kind of be impressive in your answer. So they say all kinds of different things. But he wants to just keep digging in, why? And so then he'll tell them some of his reasons, and I'm not going to read them all, but I'm going to read a few that he includes in the book. And then we're going to get down to the meat of his answer. He says, I write because I'm so full of myself. I believe the world is waiting to read my brilliant thoughts. Okay, well, that's not an answer I would have thought would have come from a Christian, godly guy, right? But it's honest, and maybe that is your answer too. He says, I'm a needy guy, and out of my need to feel appreciated, valued, and affirmed, I write. That's as simple and direct as I can put it. So there again, that might be why you write, it's one of the reasons why Cec writes. Writing is one way to compensate for my feelings of inadequacy. I write to resolve issues and explore possibilities. It's a form of therapy. And he jokes about saving $500,000 in therapist fees by being a writer. But basically what it boils down to is I write to find out who I am. And that is the answer that he has come up with for himself. So after he has explained this, it allows the conferees to relax and to think about their answers. Now, I read this book years ago when it first came out, 2011, and I've been kind of thinking about this question on and off since then. And the only answer I have for myself is one I hesitate to share because it sounds like such a cliche. But because we're being transparent, because it's still the best answer after 10 years that I'm able to come up with, and it was still the answer that was hitting me when I reread this chapter in preparation for today, is I write because I can't not write. So, I would like to hear some of your answers. Does anyone else have an answer? Why do you write?
Johnny, I just typed in the chat the very same thing. It's like a spiritual compulsion.
Mm-hmm.
Just compelled to write. And I think often of the verse that says, to whom much is given, much will be required. And when the gift is in you to write and you don't, then I feel it's a form of disobedience. And for me it's just obeying God and employing the gift that I feel he's given me.
I like that. Yeah, I so agree with that.
And to piggy off of that, even if much hasn't been given, even if I've been given 1 talent versus 10 talents, I'm responsible to be faithful to what God has given me. And I get these ideas and they're fun, but if I see them as a gift, the gift is from, all good gifts are from God. And I need to be faithful in the little. And hopefully I'll be able to be faithful in much. But in the meantime, I'm just got to be faithful in my little.
I like that. Be faithful in my little.
That's good.
Good. Anyone else want to share? We've got some people saying things in the chat. Brandy?
Yeah. Now I can tell you, I can not write. I have done it for a long time, but I have not been happy in not writing. And so I want to read what I wrote back in 2016. Actually, it was in June 2016. I wrote, when I was pondering this, because I've really struggled with this question, I write to find out who I am and where I am in relation to God and where I need to be so I can find areas he wants me to grow in and learn from. Now, what I wrote when I read it this time is going to be very honest. I don't want to find out who I am, and I don't want to write, but when I do it, I enjoy it more than I admit or remember when I'm not doing it. I've long given up wanting to share anything with the world, but I am finding increasingly a desire to be read, for others to enjoy what I enjoyed producing, even through the hard spots. And if I look at that, when I answer this again, it's like I said, this has like been my nemesis question. Why do you write? I've never been able to answer it very well. And initially it was because I knew that God had given me the gift. And so I was stuck with, I'm right because I feel I have to.
Yeah.
And I felt I have to because I knew it was a gift from God that he had given me as a trade. But I got stuck on that. And I didn't understand why he gave it to me. I thought it was this is a directive, this is what you have to do. Well, no, in going through all this time around, I realized that, or God showed me that he gave it to me because he made me to enjoy writing. It wasn't supposed to be a burden. It was supposed to be a joy and something that I'm good at doing so that I can enjoy the labor of my hands. And so now when I look at writing and somebody asks me this question, I can say, I write because I enjoy it and I'm good at it.
I like that.
I have to say too, Johnny, there is a trap, and I have had a lot of writer friends who fell into it. And they're like, well, God gave me this gift and now I have to use it. And I just finished teaching my workshop on contests, but then they're like, but I can't find an agent and I can't get published and I keep getting rejection after rejection. So then they draw this conclusion, well, maybe I'm not as gifted as I thought. So there has to be more in the motivation to write than just feeling you're gifted. And you have to know how to get affirmation from God when it doesn't come from people. And, I said something that surprised me one time when I was asked, and I said, I feel pleasure. I feel God's pleasure when I'm writing. It doesn't matter what I'm writing. What I'm writing could be crummy. But when I'm writing, I feel the presence and the pleasure of God. And to me, that is more important than any affirmation I get from people.
I love that too. That's really cool. And there is something to that okay, for me, there's like three aspects of writing, right? There's the writing, there's the rewriting, and then there's that final edit. And the one thing I like to do the most of those three things is that final edit. And actually, the thing I like the least is that initial writing. And yet, there is just something so cool when you're in that moment. Of course, I write fiction, and then these characters do things that you don't expect, or they do something that just really surprises you, or this story takes this twist that you never saw coming, even though you're the writer. It's just a surprise to you too. And those moments are the reason I write, to capture those moments, because they are thrilling. And that's when I feel the closest to God in that way. I feel close to God in church and, other times too, out in nature, whatever. But in my giftedness, that's when I feel that the most. And it's the closest to his creativity, I guess, maybe is what I would want to say. Oh my gosh, this is great. But you know what? I don't want to spend all the time on chapter 1. So I'm just going to drop it there. But hearing your reasons and being so honest about it, that was wonderful. And quickly turn it over to Norma, who's going to talk about chapter 3.
Chapter 3 is about being true to yourself. And in here, in this chapter, he talks quite a bit about how different writers that he's met just try to wax so poetic and so eloquent, and it's just not them. And as I was reading this, I thought of several times where I've tried to wax eloquent and have absolutely embarrassed the mortal snot out of myself. And I think God allows those times to humble us. I was supposed to say, I love the part, told a friend of mine, where he said, look through fear to your faith. And I actually typed rear instead of fear. Very embarrassing, because I was trying to wax eloquent instead of just speaking from the heart. And so one of the things that I really liked that he said is he said, here's the primary reason I push being real. Everything you write reveals something about who you are, even your attempts at self-concealment. And I thought that was really interesting, because oftentimes most of us are on social media, and we see these things of, this is how it looks in our mind, but then the next picture is reality. Well, that's true with our writing, and he goes over that here in this chapter. We have this idea of what our writing life is going to be, or who we are as a writer. We're the next Johnny Alexander, or the next Jerry B. Jenkins, or whatever. And the reality is, we're not any of that, because God made us very different. And so we have to know ourselves, and part of the writing journey is getting to know yourself, because it's easy to hide behind what we want it to look like, when God wants us to be authentic. And that's what I got overall out of this chapter, was be authentic to who God created you to be. All the circumstances that have brought you to this point in life, good and bad, have made you the person God wants you to be in this writing journey. And so one of the things that really struck me, I'm sorry, I keep looking down. I have this book on my Kindle app. So I keep looking down and I highlighted different stuff. You know how that goes. So I'll try to be more professional. Anyway, one of the things that struck me, he says, as you probe within and more fully accept who you are and gradually understand your motives and core values, you strengthen and enrich your writing. So the more we know who we are and all the stuff back there that has brought us to this point, the better our writing, the more we can write from the heart. And he talks about that throughout this book, that you have to write from authentic you. And it really needs, even if it's fiction, it still needs to come from the heart. Because without the heart, it's drab, boring, and it feels unreal. And Cecil gives several examples in here, or Cece gives several examples in here of writers that would bring these things to him so proud, and this is great. And he says, the writing's not bad, but it's not you. There's no heart in it. So my question to you is, do you put you forward, or do you put another version of yourself forward? That's all I have.
Anyone want to answer that scary question?
I'll answer my own question. I'm probably one of the newer ones to writing among all of us. I've been doing this maybe 5 years, seriously. I think Sophie and I kind of started this journey together. But I want him to be this great fiction writer, and I'm going to be the next. I just lost her name. Anyway, Terry Blackstock, that's what it was. I'm going to be the next Terry Blackstock. And God said, no. And I would try to write and emulate these other writers that I have so much respect for. But God gave me a voice, and he wants me to write from me. And that's scary, because I know me. And that makes that kind of, what God has called us to do is not for the faint at heart. And I'm not even just talking about the rejections and all of that. We have to get real with ourselves too. And that's hard sometimes, at least for me, because, I like everything to be just great. That's my personality. Yay. But, God's using that for me. He's pulling me into writing things to encourage other people because of all the things back there that he's helped me through, and whatever's out there that he's going to help me through. So, yeah, I've tried to write like I'm not, and it hasn't gone well. But when I write from the heart, then God blesses.
And that's how you find your voice too. And I'm not going to get off on that because I don't know if someone else is going to talk about voice, but that's where your voice comes from, is you. And you can only do that by allowing it to be you and not trying to be somebody else. All right, go ahead, Yvonne.
I wanted to say to Norma, for me to be doing this writing on domestic violence, it's not a part of my life I wanted to even touch. And I fought God for a long time until I had that nightmare. And in that nightmare, I went to heaven early because I hadn't done what he told me to do. And I woke up and I realized, no. When I get there, I want him to say, well done, good and faithful servant, Yvonne. Not, well, welcome, Chicken Little. And so I proceeded. And the harder I work at it, the sicker I get. Yesterday, I thought, wow, I am going to do all those things that Rhonda said, and I'm going to get busy. Today, I'm going to write at least 4 to 6 hours.
Wow.
I wrote 0 hours. I went for my medical appointment, and from the time I got there until I got home at 4:30, it was wait, wait, wait. The computers were down when I got there. Then it was, well, I had to go to the refill pharmacy for one medication. And then I said, oh, I want to pick up my saline solution. No, you have to go to the main pharmacy for that. So I got to the main pharmacy and I asked if I could just go up to the self-help counter. I showed them my self-help approval card. Oh, you have to wait in line. You've got to get a regular number like everybody else. And I waited and I waited and I waited and I got to the counter and it wasn't in the computer yet because the doctor didn't have the computer up. I said, well, just call. That's what the guy at the other desk told me. No, I'm the only one. Everyone else is at lunch. You'll have to go back. And it was the same thing in the lab. They want a CAT scan of the back of my head because that's the part that is still not the way it needs to be. And I had to wait in line again. And I got to the front of the line and she said, oh, they're booked today, but they'll call you back in 24 to 48 hours. And then you can pick from the option they have open. And then not to be able to find my book this morning.
I saw that in the chat. I'm sorry you couldn't find your book.
I was rereading it.
So you know it's got to be somewhere. It's got to be there.
One of the things that being a writer has taught me, you know, when I worked full time, I wasn't in charge of my schedule. And now I feel like I'm in charge of my schedule. But guess what? I'm really not. I'm really not. And it isn't, I won't write today what I determine I will write. I write today what God determines I will write today. And for me, this season of sickness and disability, what's happening is God is hammer and chisel away at my self-determination and wanting me to yield to his determination and his timing and his way. And there is a stubbornness inside of me that I know he's buffing out of my life, chiseling, you know, one little chunk at a time is really a better way of thinking it. And how I wish I knew this without going through this lesson, right? But evidently I needed this kind of a lesson to get me going the direction he wanted me to go. So it's finding peace in the midst of the trouble.
Yeah.
That is worth the suffering that we endure to get there.
Absolutely. All right, let's go on to chapter 5, and Jan is going to talk to us about that one.
Chapter 5 is called The Conceit of Writing. E.B. White once said it took courage to write and even a little bit of conceit. I think it's right. And C said that if he writes a 500-word article, I'm making a claim about myself. I'm saying I know things others don't, or I tackle an old topic with a new perspective and understanding. Isn't that conceit? It certainly is. There was a story about a British woman that wrote a story and self-published it. She thought it was just wonderful, and she kept getting negative reports. It went viral and the reports got worse and worse. And the woman that put up the first post had to finally take it down because everything was getting so negative and out of control. So I think we have to step back and remember that our writing may be good to us at first, but we need others to help us, and we need to hold our conceit back and realize that just because we write it doesn't mean it's perfect, and we have to watch our conceit. we do need a little bit of conceit. It's important. It's a way to know more about ourselves. And I had never thought of it until he said that that's a way to express ourselves. And I was like, writing for children, I kind of look at it as I put myself in the story. And a lot of what I write, I have my grandkids in it, but then I put myself in their place and see what it's like writing creation or watching creation. It's like I was using my mind's eyes, like what is God trying to tell me that it would be like? And how can I share this with children so that they can understand better? So it's like, it's okay to have some conceit, but we have to kind of rein it in sometimes. We all have struggles, and with the technology we have more people we can reach out to. And we have, like, this group is wonderful. We can share with each other our struggles with our bodies, our minds, and our writing. It's like, okay, I'm stuck here. How can I step out of the way and do better? So I guess that's my question to you, is how can you hold your conceit in check to share what God needs you to share?
I seem to always go first. My brain goes 100 miles an hour, and most of the time I'm trying to just catch up. But
Yeah.
I find the word conceit very offensive. If I'm allowed to disagree with C, I resist conceit in any way, form, or fashion, because how can the vase be proud of itself when it's the potter that made it? You see, and say, well, I'm valuable. All of my value comes from the hand of the potter on me. And I would prefer to say I'm confident because of Christ in me. That to me is not conceit. When I write something and I look at it and I say that's good, it's not because I'm good. I feel the presence of the Holy Spirit right now. It's not because I'm so good. It's because God is so good. And I just listen to him. That doesn't make me more valuable or less valuable than anyone else. And I tell you what, there are some very good writers who have every right to be conceited, who've never been published, right? So I would object. Maybe he personally fights that because, I think the more success you have, the more temptation there would be to become conceited, and he has been very successful, right? So maybe I'll fight that booger, later on in my career. But right now, that doesn't sit with me right, except perhaps as a check. And I'm sure that's the way he meant it, that we all need to root out if there's any conceit and keep that under control.
Okay, anyone else want to respond to either Rhonda or to the question?
Well, I can tell you that years ago, pretty much everything that I learned in my personal life, I instantly turned it around to write an article to share it with somebody else so that they could learn it. And at that time in my life, everything in my thought process was centered on me. Even though I love Jesus, I would get frustrated with myself that everything was always me first. And I remember telling God, I cannot stand how self-centered I am. Please take this out of me. And I can't do this myself. I want to be you-centered. I do not want to be me-centered, but I don't know how to fix this. And it would come out in my writing because, everything I learned, I'm like, oh, I can teach somebody. And yeah, I had things to say. And yes, it was valid to be able to take what I learned and share it with other people. And then God gave me a special needs child that totally upended my world. And as soon as she was born, she was a heart patient. She was in heart failure. She was on tube feeding. She didn't have normal anatomy. And I had no time for myself to do anything. My day was scheduled every minute of the day between drawing up heart medicines, trying to pump food for her because she couldn't eat it herself, trying to prime the pump, trying to give it to her, trying to make sure she didn't choke to death, literally choke to death in getting her food. There was no minute of the day that I had to myself, and I couldn't even sleep because she would wake up in the middle of the night with her overnight feedings, choking to death. So I went from all me to no me. And that completely leveled me, and it affected my writing. Now I'm 12 years out from that really bad boot camp. And I look and I say, and for these past 12 years, I've said, I don't have anything to offer. I don't feel like I have anything to give anybody, nothing to share anymore. And it's a complete polar opposite, where before I was like oversharing, sharing everything. So now I'm in this phase where trying to find the middle ground where I feel safe sharing and I can give some things of value to people, but even finding, do I have anything of value to share anymore? Because it was such a life-altering experience that I went through. But it took the conceit out. I mean, I had like an over-the-top conceit, and I knew it was something I couldn't take out myself. And so God gave me a really hard way to take it out, but he did take it out. Yet I know that you do need to have, as Rhonda says, a measure of confidence in that you have something of value to share with others. Because if you don't have something of value, and God has given you this gift of a writer, then that you can't really write. And I know that from experience, because I have spent an entire decade feeling devoid of anything to share. You can't write like that. So you have to have something within you that you know has value. Now, I don't necessarily think it's conceit. Before, it was conceit. Now, for me, it's different. God has shifted my core being of who I am. And so it might begin as conceit, but it can shift and change into recognize that what initially was there maybe 12 years ago did have value. But in my heart, it was my heart, the foundation of my heart, that wasn't quite where it needed to be. And so God can change that and make the heart part right, so that when you do share it, it will be sweet and not bitter to whoever is receiving it.
Very nice. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on then. And we're going to go back to Norma, or no, sorry, to Brandy with chapter 17. I almost skipped you.
That's okay.
No, I don't.
It kind of piggybacks on what I just shared a little bit.
Yeah, 17.
Because this is, do you want to shatter writer's block? And well, writer's block has been hanging on my back for 12 years. So probably I'm a really good one to discuss this chapter. Cease talks about how there are all kinds of there's all kinds of writing advice for how to get out of writer's block. Limit your interruptions. Discover the best time that you write. Use some folders to put material in to maybe help you have a special document so that you can pull out of information from there. Exercise. Create deadlines if you don't have any. Start important projects with timing, so you aren't forced to hurry up and finish something. So you have a good pacing with your projects. So he says, think time. Give yourself space and permission to ponder your project. Pray. And then location. Change where you're working. Maybe these things will help change things up. But then he goes on to mention that maybe there's something else that is causing writer's block. And he says, maybe writer's block is a symptom of something within you and not the cause of something that's trying to stop you. What if it comes from some wise inner part of yourself that wants to help you? Perhaps if you're battling writer's block, maybe you're really battling something deep within yourself. And I have to say, with 12 years of finding out what do I do with this? I know I have this gift of writing, 12 years of kind of battling and skirting things. And my skirting things turned good because I ended up learning to write fiction. Now I'm writing fiction, but I have not touched nonfiction for 12 years. And that is what I predominantly wrote before. So I have to say, there is truth into what he says here. So he says, to ask a question, what is going on inside of you that is stopping you from writing? And I tell you, when I read this chapter, I had to take it piecemeal because I'm like, I felt this thing rise up within me. And I know that I get to certain parts about writing and I feel myself step back. I'm going to live my writing life in passive mode. It's kind of how I feel. It's like, I'm going to be passive about my writing. I'm not going to get active and get in and do it. I mean, really, that's like been my mindset. And it's kind of a strange place to live. It's not very comfortable. You won't get very much done living like that. Then he goes on and says, first consider writer's block is as a powerful force to help you regulate the creative process. And he says, your unconscious self vetoes the commitment of your conscious ego. And I do that. I will veto things. I'll veto ideas. Mm-hmm. And it's because there's something buried underneath. And I don't know about the rest of you, but you can be really, really good at burying an issue so far down, like miles down within yourself, that it's really hard to even know it's there, except for maybe you're having a little bit of trouble writing. But it's really, there's something there and it's buried. And you got to try and figure out what it is if you want to be able to have peace within yourself, because you won't have peace within yourself and you won't have peace within your writing unless you can dig down and uncover what that is and pull it out and deal with it. So he says, second, think of your ability as a gift from God. And then third, consider the blockage as one that comes from within, not an outer force that works against you. And I really like what he says. The single most troublesome thing about writer's block, of which he's aware, is that it comes when we write against our values. I do agree with that. There have been some things where, I've considered writing some things and I'm like, no, I just can't do that. There's it's like a pushback, a halt within your spirit. Like, no, can't do that. That can happen when you consider writing something that's you're not interested in, something that's you're not really designed to write about. I could probably write about medical stuff, but you know what? No, thank you. I really don't want to. So I don't know. I look at writer's block and I say, okay, what is it down inside me? There's something in there that's throwing up a fit and saying no. It could be a life issue that's completely disconnected to your writing. That's kind of what it is for me. I'll tell you, for me, this is kind of weird. I remember years ago, Cec had actually looked at me and he said, he didn't look at me. I think it was in an email. He sent me an email. He says, I admire your ability to be real on the page. He said, I struggle to do that. And I admire that you can do that. Well, with things that happened with my daughter, I lost that because she had such difficult medical issues that doctors couldn't figure out. And she was so different than everybody else because she has a rare chromosome disorder. She wasn't fitting into doctor molds. I had her team of doctors actually turn on me and blame me for her problems and try to take her away. Now, when you have medical professionals that you trust to help you get your daughter to a safe place medically, and then they turn on you and then they try and take her, that does something to your core. And it makes you distrust people. It makes you not want to share anything. And it makes you want to shut down everything within and not share anything at all anymore. Because my goodness, the things that I needed to share to get help, somebody turned and try to damage me with and damage my loved ones with. So it can be really hard to recover from something like that. But for me, that's kind of some of my issues and why I ended up reverting and moving away from the very thing that Cease had commented he admired about me. I couldn't really do that well anymore. So this is something that I still struggle with and why I shy away from still writing nonfiction, because I don't trust people very much anymore with what I might share with them. And that's something I have to work through. That's my reality. And even just sharing that here is a part of my process in dealing with that. But that impedes my ability to write. So if you're struggling with writer's block, ask yourself, is there something within me that I'm struggling with? Maybe I don't want to face, maybe I don't want to admit that I really should wrestle with, because maybe if you wrestle with it, you can at least identify it, bring it back out of the depths of your soul to at least face it. Because if you keep it buried so far down, you can't face it. If you can face it, even if you don't deal with it right away, you can at least face, facing it is half the battle. It really is. Because you can't deal with something if it's buried and hidden and you don't see it. So if you got the writer's block going on, is there something there that you need to deal with and address in order to move forward in your writing? You may never write about it. I probably will. I may have had people tell me, oh, you need to write your story without it. And you know what? I don't. I really don't need to write about it. But I need to wrestle with the issues that I struggled with through that process in order to get past it to write about other things. And then maybe if you have writer's block, are you struggling to write something that might be against your values? So ask yourself these questions if you hit writer's block, and then try to work them out so that you can move forward in peace in your heart.
Very good. Thank you for that. This was a very important chapter, I felt, because we all deal with it at some point or another. Okay, well, that's where we wanted to start out, but does anyone have something they want to share from either one of the chapters we did talk about or another chapter that we have not gotten to, or to respond to anything that's been said already? We want to give you the chance to do that. Anybody?
I had a fun thought at chapter 10.
Okay.
And it was about doing the work as a writer. And it just occurred to me that when God instructed the builders and Moses to build the tabernacle, and then David and Solomon to build the temple, it would have been, and all you mothers know this, it would have been much easier if he just did it himself. He was the God who spoke the universe into existence. He didn't need to give detailed instructions to people who had never done this before, but he chose to give them that inspiration, to give them the plans and have them do the work, not because he needed it, but because they needed it and we needed that. And so I feel that way about our stories. God could blast our thoughts into the whole world. He could communicate it any way he chose, but he chose to have us do the work and to do the struggle to conform us and our concepts to his image, and then share it with other people so that they could have hands and feet on what God wanted them to know. So that was my thought on 10.
Yeah, chapter 10 is waiting for inspiration, about how, some people just say, I'm not going to write until I'm inspired. Well, then you may never get anything written. And there is someone who has said, and I don't remember who it is, he says, I wait for inspiration and it meets me at 9 o'clock in the morning at my desk every day, because it's, part of it's just showing up. And I murdered that quote, but it's something like that. You have to do the work, whether you're inspired to or not. That was a great thought, Sophia. Thanks for sharing that. Who else has something to share? All right, then we're going to go back to Norma with chapter 4, which is, I do not know right off the top of my head, Searching for the Real You.
Okay. Can I jump ahead to something else?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm sorry, y'all forgive me. My husband thinks he's a comedian today.
Hello, Mr. Poor.
Also, hello, Mr. Poor. Now go away.
We want to see the faces.
All right, come here. Thank you. I wanted to talk about, and I gotta find it because I jumped ahead to catch up where you guys were giving. You know, we've talked often about voice and what does it mean to find your voice. And I liked what he said here about your voice. And because a lot of us, especially, excuse me one second, Mr. Ford, come here, please. You bothered me, now you have to make a grand appearance. Look in the camera and wave.
Hello, people.
Hello.
That's my goofy husband, y'all.
So Norma, what chapter are you on?
This is chapter 13.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's 4 chapters on voice right here together. So that, I mean, it is an important topic, obviously, to Mr. Murphy for him to have that many. So you're going to 13, embracing your voice?
Yes.
Okay.
Again, you know, he hit on this a little bit back in chapter 3. Was that 3 that I did? Or the first chapter where we talked about that a little bit. And so he says, finding your voice is a sacred quest. Respect your search because your voice is a gift from God that's unique to you. And again, oftentimes we have to be careful to not sound like somebody else. And he gives the example of you can have 3 different people tell the same story, and there's going to be somebody that you just hang on to every word they're saying because they're telling that story in their voice. You know, they've kind of accepted that story and they're retelling it in their way. And yet somebody else will just read it, maybe trying to tell it in that somebody else's voice or how they think it should be read. And sometimes as writers, we do the same thing. So he gives us a few questions here in this chapter, and to help you find your voice or refine your voice if you've kind of wandered and are a little lost. What do I want to write is one question, and that's something we kind of need to know a little bit. I know God's changed my direction like twice, but aside from that, you got to kind of know where you're going. What issues or deep concerns do I have? What are the things that are really on my heart? What are the unsolved issues of my life? And that kind of piggybacks back to what Brandy was talking about writer's block. What's in there that's keeping us kind of hung up? And then the last one he says is my writing honest? Even when we're writing fiction, even if we're writing fantasy, is your writing still honest to you? Or are you still trying to run away? Are you trying to, well, if I do this fantasy over here, then I don't have to really deal with the real thing here. And that's what I gleaned from this chapter and finding your voice. Your voice, how you talk, how you react in real life, that needs to come through on the pages because that's your voice. And so to me, these 2 chapters, 12 and 13, I don't even know what chapter I'm on now. 12 and 13 on all about voice are some of the best I've read because voice seems to be a little bit of a hard thing to describe. And he's done a really, really great job in these 2 chapters, giving many examples of voice, and that those that know you can tell right away when you write something, if that's you or if you're trying to be somebody else. I remember one of the very early pieces that I wrote a while back, and I sent it to Rachel to critique. And she said, "Where are you? You're nowhere on this page." And I went back and retweaked it and then sent it back to her, and she sent it to me. She goes, "Aha, there you are." Because I wasn't writing, I was giving facts, I was telling a story, but it wasn't me. It was just information. And so in these 2 chapters, I'm going to go back and read through these 2 again, because that's something that I struggle with a little bit. But he just explains it so well that even in your fiction and your fantasy, it should still sound like you telling the story. And for those that don't know you, they will come to know you through your stories, whether fiction or nonfiction, through your articles, through whatever you write. And I thought that was super, super encouraging and a great explanation of voice.
That's good. Yeah. And sometimes it does just take a little bit of writing. When Bethany was going to her first writers conference and, taking pages, and he asked my daughter, for those of you who are watching who don't know, he asked me to read it. And it wasn't until like the 2nd or 3rd chapter that it's like, oh, like you said, there you are, Bethany, and that's what I told her. I said, here's where you found your voice, but you're going to have to go back and rewrite that first chapter, because that was more just like writing an academic paper almost. That's the way she had written it. And that's part of the problem too. If we've been students and we've been writing academic papers that really take away your voice, and then you're writing something that's nonfiction, I think especially, you're writing it that way. So you may have to write a couple chapters and then your voice will show up. But that's okay, because all you have to do is revise. It's not like you have to throw it out. But thank you. That was really good. And I appreciate these chapters on voice too, because it is a tough one. It is tough. Okay. Jan has disappeared on me.
My camera
Oh,
popped out again on me.
no. Oh no. Are you okay? How much time do we have? Oh, we're about out of time anyway. Do you have just like a 1 minute something you want to say on chapter 6?
Chapter 6 is liking yourself.
Okay.
We have to reshape. Instead of seeking to modify and reshape our personality, we need to accept who we are and value ourselves. A question for you to think about would be, what would it do to your writing if you could appreciate yourself as you are and see that your weaknesses are as important as your giftedness? So if you kind of keep that in mind as you write, and sometimes it's hard just to like yourself. Put everybody else in front of you and just, you're on the back shelf all the time.
Yeah.
I'd also add that it can also get in the way if you don't like your life. Not just yourself, but if you're struggling with your life, that can really impede. So sometimes you might need to come to terms with your life and the lot you've been dealt. And making amends with that and working through it the best you can. I've learned that you can either fight your circumstances or you can accept them and try to make the best of what you have.
Something else I suggest would maybe journal and write about your abilities in writing and life. And this will also help build your self-esteem.
All right. And Brandy, what was your second chapter going to be?
I was just going to, if we had time, I was going to touch on chapter 19 because I was afraid.
Do you have like that you can, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, I didn't have a whole lot to talk about, except that if you are afraid about something in your life, or you're afraid of letting your work out, or afraid of letting somebody else read you on a page, that can impede your ability to put something on the page. And so I would just encourage people to pick up the book and read the chapter.
Yeah.
And the rest of the book, because this whole book will help you to overcome being afraid, or at least to wrestle with it so you can work through it in a good manner, because being afraid really comes out of, I think, everything having to do with who you are. And this book really, Unleash the Writer Within, really helps to free up all of those things inside you that are binding up your ability to write, including being afraid.
Yeah. Well, this has been just an excellent book. I know, like, just the way my life has been the last few months, it's been like one have to after another. Like, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. And when I picked up the book to start reading it last week, it was another, I have to read this book for Writer's Chat. it was a have to. But within the first chapter, it changed from a have to like, oh my gosh, I'd forgotten how wonderful this book was. I needed this. I need to be reading this. And it was not a chore at all to finish it, in fact, I finished it 2 days ago, so it was just, I really wanted to speed through it. And yet I was thinking what Brandy had said before about never being able to quite finish the book because there's so much in it and she'd have to keep stopping. And that's how I feel now too. It's like, I need to go back over it. I need to ask myself these questions and not just fluff over them, but really think about some answers to these questions and yeah, wrestle with some things, I guess, as we've talked about, and so forth and so on. So anyway, I hope you all got something out of this today. If you haven't read the book, I highly, highly recommend doing so. It really, Mr. Murphy is transparent in it. He does share his weaknesses. He shares his own struggles. And I think when we read that, it gives us permission to sort of do that with ourselves. So Jan, can you tell us about next week?
Tom Bluebaugh is going to be back with us. Shoot, I forgot what he.
Melissa's not here.
It was all in our
Was it
email, not in
keywords?
our.
It's not
Keywords?
No, we weren't going to do keywords because that wasn't something.
No, it was. Yes.
He's gonna be here.
LinkedIn. It was LinkedIn.
That's it. Thank you.
And we've never had an episode on LinkedIn.
No.
So we are very, yes. Besides us not remembering what it was initially, we are very excited.
We have a little bit of discussion about things, so.
About LinkedIn. So yeah, that's going to be pretty cool because I don't know about you guys. I mean, I have a LinkedIn profile, but it just kind of sits there and I get all these email notifications and it's just like, ignore them.
No, he knows it inside and out. He's really good. So if you have trouble, he'll be able to help you.
I think that's really great. So thanks for that. And there is also I have missed a lot of the chat because of wanting to pay attention to what was being said. So I'm sorry about that, but I did notice that someone mentioned a Chicken Soup for the Soul call out for humorous stories, and there's a link in there. So if you are interested in doing that, you'll want to be sure and hit that. So thanks everyone for being here. Thanks for your input. Thanks for joining in your comments. Again, if you're watching the replay, we welcome you and invite you to join us any Tuesday morning, 10 o'clock Central, 11 o'clock Eastern, and to join our Facebook Writers Chat group and to check out our Facebook Writers Chat page. So that's it till next week. See y'all later. Bye-bye.
Hi, thank you.